To the house huddle, I want to pause momentarily to highlight some of the areas from the previous slides in the event that you did not want to pause the video. I hope as you watch, you will think critically about the narrative and the disservice it's done to the families and the public. I'm going to be covering my trip with my oldest son over the Christmas holidays to both Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Aberdeen, North Carolina. A personal decision I made on this trip was to not record any cemetery footage. Any footage of the sort seen in this video was taken at a secondary location. I did not film nor have my phone out while inside Shanann and the kids' final resting place. I've noticed in the comment sections on some videos the assumption by some that just because they see a photo or hear one question, they jump to a defense or opinion rather pausing to think. This channel goes beyond the main narratives, beyond the superficial speculation, and dives deeper into the many layers so we can learn from this case, and each one of them discussed on this channel. You will get far more out of this platform if you refrain from narrow thinking and see each video as a piece of a puzzle, parts of a whole. One person or one case out of many other pieces, also known as statistics and case history. Each video isn't created with the concept of grouping an entire case theory into one video. I encourage you to see the topics discussed beyond this case and reflect on society in your own personal experiences before commenting. What are your thoughts on these hidden moments now frozen in time? I look forward to the many discussions that follow in each video. Let's get started in Colorado. Leading into the summer of 2018, Shanann's very public Facebook page and presence sprinkled hints of the year's earlier dysfunction that would progress into the ultimate pressure cooker. On April 17, 2018, we see a post from Shanann where she outlined her entire summer agenda. Now, this was common back then and early on with Facebook. People would always update and say, oh, I'm going to McDonald's, or oh, I'm going swimming, and they would tell exactly where they were. So that wasn't out of the ordinary. Now, outwardly and on the surface, it appears she's excited or looking forward to the trip to North Carolina. But look at what's not there. It's strict words, no graphics, no emojis, and it's a promotional post for work. Even as a sales pitch, it's rather unimpressive, especially when you consider the strong saleswoman Shanann had proven to be in her past with auto sales and with Dirty South. Now, I'm going to pause. It does not matter what your opinion is of an MLM and how successful she was with that. She had proven that she was able to carry her own weight as a salesperson. So she knew that these posts weren't really going to reach anybody, not from a sales standpoint, especially if you compare it to how she posted things in the past. So, keeping that in mind, case in point, notice these next three posts. Notice the hashtags she uses. Hashtag no one visits us, and hashtag they are afraid of not wanting to leave. To me, this could be any outward expression of loneliness in a harsh reality. Think about it. As adults, how many quote-unquote friends, or even real friends, do you have traveling across the country to come see you? Now, I'm not asking about how many Facebook friends do you have, not how many you think would come, but look at your own life. How many of you have friends who have actually dropped everything and made some sort of sacrifice in this past year to be there for you? I bet some of you have friends 20 miles away that you still haven't seen. And I'm not saying this to be judgmental. Truthfully, we all have those friends, and if we don't, then we're probably that friend. Life happens, and yes, we get busy, but isn't that where the warped reality of social media comes into play? It's one thing to be quote-unquote connected online every day, It's a harsh reality check when you realize you can have 50,000 Facebook friends and only one will actually show up for you. Again, knee-jerk reactions aren't needed in the comments, but just let that sit with you for a minute as we take off from Colorado and make the flight to North Carolina. We see in the video of the girls the excitement they had as they were able to fly for the first time. As a mother, I remember just how excited I was to take my boys on their first flight. Boy, did they think they were something. The fun type of butterflies wanting to capture every moment. And thankfully, Shanann had her father with her for this first flight to North Carolina. Now let's shift focus over to Shanann. She's recently had, in my opinion, an emotional trip with Chris to San Diego. I say emotional because, in my opinion, this was where they had some sort of come to Jesus talk about their marriage and where it was headed. Dishonest or not, she was comfortable enough to leave. And I do believe this. I have some strong opinions about that San Diego trip, and it will definitely be a video on its own. But at one point during the San Diego trip, it appears that Chris has eased Shanann's mind about their future, and they were able to leave on relatively positive terms. This allows Shanann to look forward to the start of the vacation in North Carolina. The flight gives her time to, in essence, float for a moment. A temporary, suspended state of reality, neutral about what was left behind back on the ground as they arrive at the airport in North Carolina. A familiar emotion stirs as she knows she is now back home. Does that ever happen to you when you return home? Does your stomach ever turn or churn as familiar smells and sights awaken your senses? This is day one, week one of vacation. Take a moment to think back to your most recent visit home as an adult. The temperature changes, the environmental shifts, in this case, the accents thicken. There's an even notable shift in class and socioeconomic statuses across the community. For a split second, she takes a deep breath. Then, no doubt, the squeals from Cece pierce through, and they've landed back on the ground. The drive from the airport to Aberdeen is close to 2 hours, and passing through the city and some familiar 2-lane back roads, they make the journey to Aberdeen. With each passing mile, the commercialized effects of social media fade away to the real and raw vulnerability of reality. Red is dead, but gray makes them stay. We've all heard the phrase, he or she is a walking red flag, but how many times do you hear someone say, he's just, she's just, or they didn't mean it like that? Think about it. Really let that sink in. In this case, you hear over and over that no one saw it coming. Chris would have never done that. Or even worse, we hear about Shanann's red flags. But have you ever actually been the victim of abuse? Have you lived this life before? Sadly, there are more of us who can say yes than no. And yet, as far as case discussions go, the level of personal denial seen in the comments is exactly why this channel will continue to highlight the unforeseen dangers to the public. Now, her family has been scrutinized a lot, and I will be the first to say that I too have questions for them as to why they choose to respond or react a certain way. However, I am also an educated professional in grief and loss of life, so I am able to see grief in many stages with her family. It doesn't mean that it makes sense to the public, but then when the hell does grief ever make sense? The weight of this tragedy did not end when Shanann and the kids were buried. As any victim, parent, or sibling that has lost their identity or someone they love to DV will tell you, you replay that mess over and over and over in your mind. What did I miss? How did I not see this? Why didn't she say something? Why didn't she tell me? This brings me to, in my opinion, one of the most heartbreaking comments made during Frankie Jr.'s interview with police, shortly after the girls and Shanann were found. Now, keep in mind, I've heard this interview several times over the last almost 5 years now, and it wasn't until this, most recent time that I listened to it that this really stood out to me. So, I've been gatekeeping this because I wanted to make sure that I delivered the content respectfully, and I hope it helps him and others to understand that recognizing the red flag when it's masked as a gray one is unfortunately a social trait that we all are having to learn. I share Shanann's case because it can and will save so many lives in the future. So Frankie Jr., if you're listening, it was the moment with the coleslaw, bro. That was huge, and you knew it in your gut. You knew something was off, but didn't have a clue that it went as deep as it did. And who would? I mean, after all, it was just lunch or dinner, and, everyone's reaching in and grabbing what's theirs, and, it all boils down to that last coleslaw. But something did not sit right with you in your gut. And that's not your fault, dude. That's not your fault at all. And I hope and pray others will hear this and take pause, because it's the gray areas that we have got to start holding others accountable for. Let's listen.
Dinner time, we had Bojangles, and they had like these little separate, you probably don't know Bojangles, it's a chicken place.
I've heard
And
of
they
it.
have little things of coleslaw, and they only had like so many for like the family. And there was like one left, and I was like, Shanann, do you want it? She's like, no, you can have it. And Chris is over here scarfing his down, but he hasn't been there, so I was like, I didn't think, they already had Bojangles once or twice, and he loved it. He grew up at his house, and I was like, let me his, and I was like, Shanann, you eat it. She was like, no, it's okay, I promise. I'm like, just eat it, she won't. I don't know, it's just how we are. We're both stubborn,
Yeah.
So it was sat there in the fridge forever till someone ate it, but I ended up eating it. But, I don't know, it's just, I have no idea where this would even come from. I've come up.
Now, listening to this clip may not be as boldly evident at first. I encourage you to re-listen to this interview after you finish this one. Listen for the gray flags. You can practice this with every single family member that was interviewed and recorded in this case. Everyone but Chris and Kessinger. It's an unfortunate reality for society that the standards of human behavior have been downgraded and excused so much that the bare minimum is celebrated and praised, yet we act so surprised when something so terrible happens. What exactly should one think if the bare minimum is praised, then the bad really isn't that bad? Or is it? This is where my concept comes in for gray flags. As someone who spends a lot of time at the beach, this can also be seen as a yellow flag. The water looks manageable, and sometimes even calm on the surface, but the undertow is silently waiting to rip your legs and life straight out from under you. Before you know it, you're gasping for air and fighting for your life. Gray flag. The only way, in my opinion, is to learn, as you do with undertows, how to swim or survive the behavioral undertow. If you fight reality, it will tire you out every time. You will lose that battle and often your life. This fight looks like sandcastles of excuses, buckets of it's not that bad, and shovel after shovel of enabling. To my fellow singles out there dating, and honestly, even married couples, you know exactly what I'm referring to, and we see that even so in this case. The man texts you back. He communicates to say he's running late. He pulls the chair out for you. He opens the door. He cares for you when you're sick. She provides for your family, or he provides for your family. She helps you clean house. She helps you take care of the kids. Guys, these aren't things that deserve praising, both man or woman. These are bare minimums that are vowed in a marriage to occur, and they are the bare minimum to a healthy relationship and partnership. So don't allow these types of behaviors to be an excuse for mistreatment or manipulation in other areas. I'm not saying don't appreciate them, rather, don't let them be what makes an exception to poor treatment in other areas. When you're not being treated respectfully, say something. Give them the chance to change and make it right. I mean, that is marriage, right? You have highs, lows, good days, bad days. You have to give a moment or chance for redemption and forgiveness. But then, when you notice someone keeps doing the same things over and over with zero regard for what you've expressed to them, that is blatant disrespect, and that is not someone who is accountable and wants to build a healthy relationship with you. You deserve more than the bare minimum, and someone who genuinely loves you will be eager to be the best versions of themselves. It will hurt them to know that they hurt you. While you may not agree on everything, there is a respectful compromise and conversation to be had so you both can move forward. The life advertised on social media using creative words, filters, and edits rarely identically matches up to reality. It doesn't mean life isn't good or as sweet as a highlight reel, but it does look differently in person than through the lens of social media or even online. Don't believe me? Just take a look at the menu with pictures at your next restaurant visit. I bet you the food doesn't come out looking identical to the photo, but if you're in the right place, it will still taste good. By the way, please eat before you comment. That way you're not commenting hangry. Now that I mentioned food, what else do you think of when you go back home? At least in the South, it's food. I'd like to believe we all have at least one dish we look forward to when we return home. My mother, before she passed, always made fried chicken on Sundays and fried pork chops, rice with tomato gravy when we came home to visit. Yes, that woman fried everything. I should probably give those two a try sometime soon. I haven't had either since she passed. Unfortunately, I remember both the pain and the nostalgia of returning home every time I think of those meals. Feel free to share in the comments below what are some favorite meals to eat when you return to your hometown. Meanwhile, back in the car. The roads wind back and forth as Shanann and the girls make their way with Pop to the house that's nestled towards the back of a cul-de-sac on a small country road. Were the girls sleeping when they arrived? Were they overstimulated with excitement? I'm sure they couldn't wait to get out of their car seats and off to explore this new world outside of Colorado. I'm sure Frankie Jr. and Sr. grabbed their bags, allowing Shanann to stretch and move freely, baby Nico stirring around inside her womb, doing the best he could to let everybody know he was there too. The greetings with family are immediate, and then a peaceful lull as everyone disperses. The warm air cannot be denied, not to mention the humidity. The smell of the Carolina pines, dry dirt, and the hint of rain as it's on its way welcome them to the place of familiarity and comfort. As we continue this video, I encourage you to make this trip with me as if it were you returning home with the weight of the world on your shoulders. Regardless of your stance when it comes to Shanann's contributions, if you believe she was the leading cause of their problems, then think of it as you returning home, knowing you created your greatest problem. If you believe more neutrally, meaning that they both had contributed and Shanann was coming to terms with the harsh realities, then I encourage you to think of yourself in that situation. The point of this exercise is so that you can appreciate the simple delicacies and complex emotions of returning home when you know life in Colorado is anything but what you've displayed it to be. It's also a simple lesson in empathy. While you watch this video, I encourage you to pause prior to reacting or commenting and think of each comment as how you would feel if you were in her shoes. I'm hopeful one of her family members will chime in at some point and share the small details of that arrival. Did Miss Sandy cook? If so, what did they eat? Was it a sit-down at the table dinner, or did everyone just chill together in the living room? Had they already had food at the airport? Again, why does this even matter? It matters because we're talking about two families that were absolutely destroyed by this crime. And no matter where you stand on things, you can't really have an educated opinion on something if you never take the time to slow down and appreciate the details. The small things matter because the small things are what was overlooked that ultimately stacked up against this family. After all, aren't the small things typically the sweeter memories we cling to when we reflect back? How many women can still smell cucumber melon or Hawaiian mist, anything, and it takes you right back to high school? How many of you guys remember that high school sweetheart when you smell a particular perfume? Clinique Happy or Sunflowers, anyone? Smell, and for many of us Southerners, food, takes us right back to a happier time. I can still smell the pork chops my mother would make, and it's been almost 10 years since I've had them. Again, the small things matter. They are what make up the whole picture. Now, getting back to Shanann and the girls, according to her Facebook, Shanann had an agenda mapped out for her and the girls during their time in North Carolina. The plan was for their time to be split between both sets of grandparents while also networking Thrive. During her trip, Shanann was sure to check in her location as usual per her social media history. Once I knew that my son and I were making the trip, I took some notes on these locations. I've always had a knack for standing in the places another once stood to try to gain a better perspective, and boy, did it. As our trip began in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, I was blasting the Christmas carols as much as I was the heater on high. Even the dog didn't mind because the temperatures outside were bone-chilling cold. The wind was ripping through with a teeth-clenching chill. Us Floridians were wrapped head to toe in layers, yet you would have thought I traveled to Alaska in the winter wearing a bikini. I was so cold. Huck Finn, our bougie Catahoula who hates pictures, rested peacefully across the back seat of my Corolla as he made the trip with us, refusing to get out. At any stop, the moment he felt the cold air hit his nose or paws, he was done. Keeping in mind, we traveled to Myrtle Beach during the off-season. It quite literally was like a ghost town. Little to no traffic, and everyone was nestled in their homes in the warmth of the Christmas holidays. With the exception of the homeless, which always breaks my heart. It was cold, but it was peaceful. A traumatic relief for us personally, and a chance to catch our breaths. 17 floors up, the elevator door came open and poor Huck Finn didn't know what to think. Imagine a building in the shape of a triangle. The entry to the condo was open to a foyer where the wind ripped through, bouncing off all three sides of the building. It was cold. Once inside, there was a full-size kitchen when you walked in on your right, then two queen-size bed on your left, and essentially a hotel room set up with the most gorgeous balcony view. Once the balcony door was open, you could hear the very ocean the girls last played in, rolling wave after wave as it crashed into the shore. The wind had it really moving. After taking a moment to stretch and unpack a little, we set out to find a Walmart so I could purchase all the items needed for a traditional Christmas dinner. Looks like we found everyone. The parking lot was packed on the 23rd of December with everyone scurrying around trying to purchase last-minute gifts and specialty items needed for holiday cooking. My son and I mingled and met many locals during our adventure to purchase the special ingredients that this mama uses to, make that awesome mac and cheese. One day I'll share my personal testimony in full as to exactly why we were here on this trip. But this was the first year in 16 years that we didn't have a tree towering over us and we didn't wake up in our own beds. If you're a parent who has ever had to make this type of decision, then you already know. Once the groceries were packed away and the pup kid was squared away, we napped and rested up for dinner. Not wanting to do anything fancy after driving all day, we opted for a late night cookout burger. Y'all, That was the best tasting drive-through burger I've had in a long time. We froze to death going out to get it and then made our way to the indoor hot tubs. Definitely worth it. For anyone who suffers silently with aching pains or stiff joints, you already know how amazing a hot tub can feel. I cannot, however, say the same thing about the walk back up to the condo or the blizzard force winds that ripped into us when the elevator opened and we were in wet swimsuits. Before we froze to death, we met another mother who was on, quote-unquote, vacation, and she was doing the same with her daughter, age 10 or so. We discussed Santa Claus and how he was going to find her. Apparently not being home for the holidays is unfortunately becoming the norm. I never understood why in Home Alone they always wanted to go on vacation during Christmas, but maybe they were already onto something and I was just 8 at the time. As we planned out the next day, our drive up to Aberdeen, I reviewed the locations that Shanann had checked into during her time in North Carolina. A brief overview of the list of locations Shanann checked into are as follows: the Denver, Colorado Airport, Aberdeen Town Lake, Aberdeen Parks and Recreation, Bojangles, Camping World, Vito's Restaurant, Brooklyn Pizza, L'Amour Nails, Kickback Jacks, Hickory Tavern, and one that isn't in North Carolina, but I'm wondering if she checked into the wrong location, and that was the Reach Key West Curio Collection. I did check with my source, who is an active thriver, who has attended events at the same time as Shanann, and she stated that she did not recall any events located in Key West that year, but that she couldn't be sure. So if any 2018 thrivers want to chime in about that location, drop it in the comments. That would be great. So before I take you along for the drive to Aberdeen, I want to take a moment and talk about Myrtle Beach. There was something so surreal looking out at the water. The waves stretched as far as the eyes could see. To know the girls felt that sand beneath their feet, and it's the last known memory of Mommy and Daddy together, was overwhelming. The area where the girls played on the trampoline and jumpers was quiet and closed down for the season. We drove past the Crab restaurant where this photo was taken, and no families were there to be seen. It was slow and calm, no sounds of giggles or music, just the ice-cold wind ripping between the buildings. I wanted to share a video of the strip on Myrtle Beach. It's my understanding that Myrtle Beach was such a special place for Shanann and Chris. This is the beach where they got engaged, and is also the beach where the girls first did their wave jumping experience. So once upon a time, this beach held some very sentimental memories for the younger Watts family. I will say my son and I spent very limited time on the beach, given how cold it was. However, we did take several strolls along the shoreline, even collected some shells, and I still have no words. Nostalgia seems too hopeful and reminiscent, yet eerie subtracts from the fun and the excitement that we hear from the girls in the video as they're jumping their waves. So as we take this drive down memory lane and the strip at Myrtle Beach, a few things I'd like to note about our stay in Myrtle Beach was, first and foremost, the biggest shout out to the staff at the Patricia Grand Condo Resort. This is not a paid advertisement. However, having never spent a Christmas Eve away from home or out of our own beds, we were greeted with the absolute most respectful and joyful staff. One evening when we decided to eat at the restaurant inside the condo, a good Samaritan paid for our meal. Completely caught me off guard, and yes, I legit cried, because at this point, does that really even happen anymore? And the answer is yes, it does. Pay it forward, and that we did. The simple joys of making another smile is not lost in this world. Our time in Myrtle Beach certainly did not mirror the summer of 2018 as much as it did the chill of that August. By 2 p.m., it looked like a ghost town, and not at all like this video clip you've been seeing Because Myrtle Beach was so hospitable to myself and my son, I wanted to share a more energetic video of the area, and I thank the channel Traveling with Jen for this awesome clip. I knew our major focus was going to be the trip to Aberdeen. So let's get going. One of our first stops was just outside of Aberdeen. I wanted to make sure to capture the historical signs leading into Shanann's hometown. It didn't take much, having grown up in a small town myself, to realize just how impactful returning to her hometown would have been, pending her ideas and how she felt before leaving for Colorado that first time. I've posted about it previously and mentioned it earlier, but as I have mentioned, growing up in a small town, we always had the 4th of July fireworks at the same park each year. Frankie Jr. mentions this park, and Shanann naturally checks into this park on Facebook, so of course we had to go. I will say, excuse the wind in the video. I do apologize if it gets loud, so adjust accordingly. But it was blowing, and I wanted to share with you the original audio that we took while on site. There's just an authenticity to it, and I'd really like to keep that in this video. So join me, and I'll get this clip, and we'll start playing it. Hey guys, we are here at the Aberdeen Parks and Recreation. Shanann checked in here on her Facebook on July 4th. I'm going to get a couple shots here, and it's a nice facility, has a really nice little playground area for the kids. Dogs back here, I'm sure they're fun to feed, and as every mother enjoys, taking pictures and just making memories with family on the 4th of July. So just wanted to be able to share that with you. It is freezing out here, and so Merry Christmas Eve, but nothing. It was absolutely freezing that day. Some things I do want to note about this little park was just how perfect of a place it was for families in this small town to come together, to watch fireworks, cook out, let the kids play on the playground. And guys, it would have cost nothing, maybe $5, for them to come and have this unlimited amount of fun. My son and I stayed for a little bit playing with the geese and the ducks, and I totally figured out the slow-mo feature on the iPhone 7, so you guys have to check this out. The next stop was one that just really grabbed my heart. Once we were done at the park, which took care of about 2 check-ins that Shanann had posted on Facebook, we then headed to drive by the Russek's house, where the girls and Shanann spent the last 6 weeks of summer with their loved ones. I have this in all capital letters, and let me be clear. Do not go and bother this family for any selfish reason. My son and I took a drive down a public road and drove past their house. I will tell you, I don't know what broke my heart the most. The Christmas tree crosses at the grave, or the bench on their front porch.
Are you playing in the rain?
We see in this video, as we do many of Shanann's videos, but we see this video where Shanann posted publicly. The girls are running around in the yard at
Bella kinda did.
Nana and Pop Pop's house,
She didn't like it too
Shanann
much.
is sitting on the bench on the front porch, and she's recording the video. I struggle
I know,
even
Cece
now,
was having a ball
almost
in it, right,
7 months
Cece?
later, to find the words for this video.
You want to go back and do it again?
We hear the life.
You want to go inside, or do you want to play in the rain again?
In the video of the girls
go
and
play?
Shanann, as she's talking and interacting not only with her viewers but with the girls and with her mom.
Do you want to go back out?
But
you want to go back out one more
it
time?
just seems so much larger than life.
Go get him.
Yet driving by it,
not getting
you
this for you.
realize the yard is small.
He's like a
The
rabbit.
bench is so close to the home, and it's
No, I
empty.
think I'd stood around
And just as the
going
grave
back.
drills you back to reality, so did this bench.
Cece,
and
look, there's one in our yard right over here.
If you do not understand the need for empathy for her family after seeing that,
Rain in Colorado, Kim.
I don't
Go
know
get
that
the
you're
squirrel, Cece.
human. My son and I didn't linger, we did not linger in the area I did not want to intrude or trespass, so I tried to collect my thoughts as we drove by. And
Are you out in the rain
I
now,
believe
Bella?
I drove in a circle until I could program the nearest grocery store into my GPS just so that I
A
could
little bit of rain.
go purchase some flowers for Shanann and collect my thoughts. I did record my thoughts
Susie,
as I
let's find a tree
drove,
to get this world
and I want to use that original audio for this video. So it may seem a little
Yeah, that's why Bella's out there.
rough around the edges, if you will. I believe I was probably curling my hair by the time I actually got around to videoing it, but I wanted it to be the genuine, authentic, my thoughts from that day. So let's listen. Something I'd like to take note of where Shanann checked in during her time in North Carolina is the amount of driving that had to happen in order to go to each one of these places. There were a couple of locations that my son and I just absolutely did not make it to because we realized very quickly that while she did grow up in Aberdeen and she grew up in a small town, like very small town, something as simple as like her dad still works for Dirty South, which is where she used to work. Now, from her parents' house to Dirty South, you're looking at close to an hour drive, or it's right at an hour drive one way. And I mean, again, having grown up in a small town myself, I know all too well about having to drive, in order to get somewhere that's actually going to pay you any kind of money. You have to drive into the city. So I'm assuming that that's essentially what was going on and what happened. And, I mean, it's quite a bit to make that drive. But, so anyway, it's just something to keep in mind. I will say that where Shanann's house on Peninsula Drive is compared to where her parents lived, it's still a little over an hour drive. And keep in mind, we drove up from Myrtle Beach, and we were, making this trip in one day. So we had already driven close to 2 hours from Myrtle Beach up to her hometown. And then, pardon me, I'm curling my hair. But we had made that drive up from Myrtle Beach, and so I had to make the decision that we weren't going to drive all the way out to Peninsula just to look at the house or anything like that. It was also Christmas Eve, and my son and I we would obviously, you want to be settled Christmas Eve. You don't want to feel like you're out and about, and so keeping that in mind, there's a reason why we did not go to Peninsula Drive and look at her house. Now that I've gotten back though, and I've heard more locals throughout lives that mention a particular lake, I think it's Lake Lear, that Shanann had checked into or she made mention of. I'm trying to see if it's on my list. I don't see it on my list, but I know that she made mention of it. And then I had made contact with someone in a live who actually lives in that area. And interestingly enough, this person had said that had Shanann tried to actually fit in to that crowd, it would have never happened. So I guess imagine, if you will, like, I'm going to use this analogy because I think she totally would have been on board with the Real Housewives type of thing. But just have an idea, like, if you ever watched Real Housewives of Orange County, it was like if you didn't live behind the gates, you were seen as a different status level. And that's kind of the vibe that I got from this area in particular. And if you keep in mind that Shanann's first husband was going to school to be an attorney, he did become an attorney, and now has connections all in that area. Like, essentially, it's kind of one of those things where, like, if you're married and then you get divorced and then your spouse goes off and actually, like, does something with their life, and you're like, holy, well, why couldn't you do that while we were together, kind of thing. And so it would be very understandable if he went off and basically maintained or reached the status quo, the status, and that was kind of what Shanann was aspiring to become herself, and she was wanting to do that on her own, which, and this is by no means to knock her. You guys have to understand, if you grow up in a small town, you do one of two things. You either make the decision that small town life is exactly what you want, and you're comfortable staying in it, and just, it is what it is. Or you have that mentality of, I'm going places, I'm going to get out of here, I'm going to make something of myself that's beyond what's in this small town. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with small town folks, or, just choosing not to, not everybody is driven to go make six figures and, live in a big house and all those things. Like, people aspire to do different things, and that's okay. But in this case, I think it's very evident that we can look at Shanann and say, you know what, she wanted bigger and better. Now, it's arguable whether or not that's actually what she had, but, that's not the purpose of this video. So, keeping that in mind, I really wish I would have gone into that area and maybe had dinner or something, like, because you could go to the country club and have dinner. I really wish I could have done that, because I would have liked to have had a better gauge of the people in that area, and how well they do with outsiders and things like that. I will tell you that whenever I went to the Food Lion, that is right up the road from the R's where they live, I went there to get flowers for Shanann. And again, it being Christmas Eve, like, just about everywhere was closed anyway, so I had to go to a Food Lion to get it. And I've never been more uncomfortable in my entire life. And that's no joke. And I've walked the streets of DC at night with all the homeless people. I will tell you, I don't think I've ever felt more, I don't even know if it's unsafe, but just uneasy. Like, standing in line to check out and pay, just felt very uncomfortable. And, like, you guys have to keep in mind, like, I still live in relatively a small town. Like, my family is still in this small town. And I can tell you, when you go into that small town, you would never feel the way that I felt being there. Now, there's many outliers to that. It could have been because I knew that I was buying flowers for Shanann's grave, and obviously there's a lot of controversy around people visiting and things like that. So, gotta kind of account for the outliers as well. But I can just tell you, like, I'm not rich or anything like that, but I can tell that I definitely was making more money than half the people that were standing in line next to me. And I felt like it shows. Like, however you carry yourself, it shows. But something else I noticed about being inside that Food Lion was I noticed a lot of LuLaRoe. And I did see a couple of Thrive patches on people. So it was very interesting to just look at the population of the grocery store, and you could see walking MLM advertisements. Now, I didn't understand the significance of that until I got back home and started kind of reviewing over my notes and things like that. But, and I'm just going to say CM, and if you don't know who I'm talking about, then probably should just go into the discovery a little bit. You'll figure it out. But CM's wife is a major producer or promoter, if you will, of LuLaRoe. And in that area, you clearly had people that's what they were totally into. And you saw it even in like storefronts and things like that. People would set up shop like a regular store and sell it from there. Now, mad props to them for having the gall to go after that with, essentially an MLM product. But you definitely could get a handle on the mindset of where Shanann, I don't want to say where she was at the time of her death, but I will say we are all a product of where we come from. That doesn't mean that we stay like where we came from, but there is a force within us that drives us to success or failures, and that comes from where we were raised, how we were brought up, things of that nature. Now, as the video shifts to the graveside, I'll just make a couple of comments. I will say that the drive out there, if you're going, the signal is not very good, so it's good to go ahead and look at the GPS, make sure you know your turns, because it's easy to get turned around. You absolutely cannot miss the arch that goes across the road towards the entryway. And you'll see that's where we did stop. We actually stopped on our way back out of the cemetery and took the picture, because we were there. And so it was just, essentially as if it were like a sign on the outside of the location. But the footage you see leading into the cemetery, and those were all taken at a different location. It was not taken at the cemetery where Shanann and the girls are laid to rest. I think her family has made it, they've been protective, and understandably so. And I just wanted to respect that. And honestly, again, this case and what I had going on in my personal life at the time, it really was just, it was a very personal moment, even for my son and I to go and visit. So I went to that Food Lion, was extremely uncomfortable, and the word really is unsafe. Like, I did not feel that I could get to my car fast enough to get out of that Food Lion. But I made sure to go pick up the flowers, and interestingly enough, as all grocery stores have those bright colored flowers, and I remembered her having them once in the video, and I figured, hey, I'll buy you the bigger bouquet and get you the purple ones. And so we drove out there, and originally couldn't really find the location, but it's because in all of the videos on YouTube that you see, it's all, I don't want to say glamorized, but it's scaled up. So it makes it look like, the filters and the edits and everything. I'm not going to say that it's not beautiful during certain seasons, but again, keep in mind, we were there Christmas Eve. So we got there, and it was just as the sun was getting ready to set. The sun had just sank just below the treetops, and it was so cold, guys. My heater never stopped running the whole trip, but it was just so cold. And I walked up, and it was just really interesting to me that my son, because as a creator, I've followed this case for almost 5 years now, and my son understood the weight of this trip and what this meant. And so I walked up first, and I noticed that he was kind of standing behind me a little bit. And, I walk up, and that big rectangle plaque, or I think that's what you call it, the the one that has the big hearts on it that you see in some of the other pictures. That one was covered with 4 Christmas tree crosses, and 2 of them were decorated for the girls. One of them was decorated for Nico, and then you could tell that the larger one was decorated for Shanann. And there are pictures and posts that Shanann has posted on her public Facebook about, she was so happy that her parents brought her a tree one year because she was so sick and couldn't, she just hadn't had the energy to go get one. And I believe that's something that her father does seasonally, is helps, whether it's at a Christmas tree farm or a distributor. Regardless, I do believe he works with Christmas trees around that time of year. And we are huge on Christmas in our family. And so just the impactful, powerful moment that was, and just humbling, absolutely humbling, because you realized in that moment, the grass is cold and it's wet, and these Christmas trees that no doubt if they were standing up tall, they would be full and beautiful, but they lay there flat in the shape of a cross, and they're weighed down by the water. And, the ornaments were on it, and you could tell it was done with love, but the weathering of the environment there just wasn't any life to them, and it was just so symbolic of just being there in that moment. I would also like to take a moment and point out that I believe another creator had said something to the effect of, and it just made it very dramatic that, certain things were removed from the graveside. And I would just like to add that after being there Christmas Eve and seeing the condition of the decorations, if you will, it makes sense. I mean, seasonally, you go out there anyway and you clear stuff off. You make sure, fresh flowers are out there, and you that's what you do to upkeep a gravesite. And so I would just kind of like to add that and put that out there, is even if those things were removed, like I said, we were there Christmas Eve. So the night before Christmas, Shanann and the girls had Christmas trees and they had ornaments. If it was removed shortly after that, I can't say I blame them, because honestly, the condition of what it looked like, and because of the way the weather was this past Christmas, I mean, it just makes sense. Something that I took away from this visit was that we all have a story. We all are on a journey through this life, and, God has called each one of us. He's given us a calling. He's given us a purpose. And, we're here to pursue those, that purpose. And through sharing our testimonies, we have the ability to connect with others. And I really think that is why her case took off, and why some of these cases really just hit the heart of America and hit the world, is because we're able to connect with it and say, you know what? Ooh, there's some gray flags here, and I've seen these myself. Or, whoa, I've been excusing a lot of stuff. So let me rethink how I'm going to move forward. And guys, that's what this channel is all about. And I really hope that through our experience being there in Aberdeen, and even the continued videos that come out from this channel, even about other cases, I really hope that you're able to not only enjoy the content and be, quote unquote, entertained, if you will, but also that there's something that you're taking away from it that you can apply to your life, and it's going to help, or it's going to empower you to make different choices for your life. And sometimes those are not easy choices to make. I know that I would never in a million years speak for Shanann, because that is not, she's not here. I do think she spoke quite a bit through her public Facebook posts and videos that we've seen now for 5 years. And I think it's very evident that she was all about helping her family and her friends. And, you know, she was all about, you know, thrive and selling and doing what she could to contribute to her family. Now, you can argue that all day long, however which way you want to. But in my opinion, it's no different than if she were a cashier at a gas station. The amount of money that they both bring in, I mean, are you going to argue it? There's many other things that could have been going on. But that's neither here nor there. Here in the cemetery, you know, kneeling down, freezing, and having that very real and raw moment of this highly publicized case, this, you know, these families that have just been at war with each other and with the public for almost 5 years, to come out of that cloud and drive into that cemetery and kneel down beside that headstone. There was such an impact that had on myself as well as my son. And so as we wrap up this video, I hope that, you know, take a moment, go back, listen to the section on gray flags again, and, you know, just from this day forward, start paying attention to them. You know, one, we're all going to have gray flags of some sort, but when it's a repetitive behavior and it continues, and, you know, that person is not trying to fix it, there's some statistics you're going to see here in just a moment that will blow your mind. One of them was about post-separation and the amount of homicides that happen. And knowing that where I was during this time, and then knowing the story of Shanann in that summer of 2018, it really is just eye-opening, guys. So make sure you're listening for your friends. Pay attention to your friends and your loved ones. Pay attention to those subtle changes that are occurring. I mean, obviously don't go be paranoid or anything, but, you know, I can't tell you the amount of messages I have in my direct message box where people have emailed me or messaged me and said, hey, you know, now that my status is updated on Facebook, it's like, hey, I really thought something was going on. You know, I noticed a change in your Facebook. Something was up. But do you know, so many people don't want to get involved that no one bothers to reach out and ask, are you okay? So be that person for somebody. That's the little nugget of advice and wisdom I have to pass on to you through this video is, you know what? It costs nothing to pray for somebody. It costs nothing to just reach out and say, hey, I'm thinking about you. It costs nothing to, you know, say, hey, is there any way I can help you? And if it does, I guarantee you it's worth having them around for one more day. Remember, guys, the checkout is the time to get out. Pay attention, ask questions, validate your loved one's feelings, suggest a breather, offer a safe haven, and believe them when they come and talk to you. Red flags are preventable if we identify the gray ones before they turn. If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, don't hesitate to reach out for help. I have the number listed here in the video and in the description box below. If you are in need of just a special prayer request, also, my comment sections are always wide open for those, and I will reach out to you individually and make sure that I say that individual prayer just for you. Thank you so much for joining me and for being here. Thank you for your support of the channel. If you haven't, hit that like and subscribe button. It's a free way to support the channel. And I look forward to discussing this video in the comments in the days, weeks, months to come. And until next time.